The Tales of a Red Clay Rambler is made possible in part by Snow Farm, a residential craft school in Williamsburg, Massachusetts. Fall workshops are now open for registration, including a weekend workshop on Sgraffito and the narrative surface with Kathy King in October. Simple housing, fresh home-cooked meals, and the beautiful New England landscape round out your retreat-like experience at Snow Farm. See the full schedule and register today at snowfarm.org.
Greetings, I'm Justin Rothshank, here to invite you to join me and more than 40 other potters from around the country for the 11th annual Michiana Pottery Tour on September 24 and 25. You'll find a list of all the participating potters, links to all our web stores for online shopping, a tour map, and more information at michianapotterytour.com or on our Instagram page at Michiana Pottery Tour. I hope to see you there.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 431 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I'm talking with LA-based artist Alex Anderson. In our interview, we discussed the ideas behind his use of mirrors and other reflective objects, as well as the LA art scene and the relaunch of his podcast Clay and Color, which is co-hosted by Angelique Viscarando-Laboy. If you'd like to find out more, you can check out his website. That's Alex. That's 4 Alexes written out.com. Or you can check out the podcast at brickyardnetwork.org/clayandcolor. Also wanted to take a minute and thank the folks that have donated to our fund drive. We are listener supported, so I'd like to thank Lisa Malero and Ursula Garfield for their recent contributions. If you'd like to get involved yourself, this is a great time to do it. If you become a patron on Patreon, you'll get a free t-shirt in addition to the other perks that you get, including the exclusive Tales from the Vault feed, which features episodes that are no longer available on major podcast apps. You can find out more and make your pledge today at patreon.com/redclayrambler. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Well, yeah, let's start talking about him, because that's why you came to UCLA, right?
Yes, I was since we're like so Archie Bray deep in this, I think it's fun that we can actually share some, I'm not like the, one of those name dropping girls, but like, because these people have been so influential to me, but also like and part of my journey, but also have been in this community for so long, it kind of feels relevant to share. So I was in Jingdezhen in 2011, and Donna Paulsino was there, and we became like instant friends. She is just so wonderful and warm and fun, and I loved her work, and she liked mine even though it was in these earlier stages, and she was like, oh, like you should do this, and I was like, no, I'm just studying this. I'm doing all the things you're told you're supposed to do. I'm gonna go into corporate. I had just finished an internship at Starbucks corporate offices, and then I'd gone into study abroad in the fall in Jingdezhen, and then I met her, and she was like, okay, sure, Alex, that's what you're gonna do, huh? And then she's like, well, I'll see you in 5 years and see what you're saying about that. Interesting that she knew she was going to see me in 5 years too. Like I was 19, and we continued. But I met her, and she was giving me like a list of names of artists to look at, and I was like, one of them was Adrian Sachs, and I was like, I actually don't know that work. And she was like, you don't know Adrian Sachs? You put all this gold and everything. How do you not know who that is? Like with all the gold you put on this stuff. And then I told my professor in undergrad, Sig Carpenter, and she was like, "Oh yes, you must know about Adrian." Like, and that's how she always, she's like, you must know about Adrian." And it's she's always like a like this sagely fairy godmother oracle type is kind of her oracle, both in like the like oracle at Delphi type, but also like kind of like the oracle from the Matrix. Is kind of her vibe. She's like, "Oh, you must know about Adrian." Her voice is like, "You must know about Adrian Sachs," and I was like, "Yes." So I did, and I followed his work and followed his work. And then when it was time to apply to graduate school, I didn't know that UCLA was this thing. And it's apparently quite a thing. And I just Googled Adrian to find out where he taught. And then I came to UCLA, and I was lucky, very lucky, that I got into UCLA without really knowing anything about the art world itself, or how it worked and what it looked for, and that the things that I was thinking about were actually how like artistic thinking worked. It was very fortunate happenstance, and it was the most wonderful mentor relationship I've had, other than Sid actually. And those two have always been really influential to me. But it was amazing. Adrian was very nurturing. He knows absolutely everything there is to know. I've always I think it's like reasonable enough to think about just where he is in life. And what I always thought was like, damn, like when that period of having him with us ends, we're going to lose so much. But yeah, I've always admired him, and I learned so much from him, and it was really wonderful to have that moment where the people who you idolize actually are as wonderful as you hope they would be, because that's very rare, I found.
And I feel like LA has now become a part of your work, but it's interesting that he kind of brought you there, even though you weren't coming for LA. So can you talk about the bigger scene in LA, the art scene, what that's like?
When I think about LA, there's always been an idea of it being the most American city. It's the farthest from the East. It has all of the imaginaries of America, like Hollywood, cars, glamour, shiny, um, aggressive, paradise, but also it's, there's a capitalist evil underlying all of it that is part of the glamour. I think evil and glamour go hand in hand. Like, look at Maleficent, looks so good. The Devil Wears Prada, it looks great, but the devil nonetheless. That's New York, but still, LA is it has those elements of like sick beauty, tainted perfection, and then always sheen and surface have been it. And I've always been drawn to that image, and LA embodied all of the things that I wanted with my life ideal, what I imagined for myself in the future, and what I imagined my America to look like. And so when I got here, I was like, oh, this is also everything that I was hoping it would be. And I think in a way it's seasoned me, it's hardened me, it's made me it's formed me in a way to understand the world through the lens of having been in LA. A short commute is 45 minutes. There's a way that there's a speed to engagements and relationships. There's a way that you act and talk and deal with conflict, or deal with um, um, things that are actually like nice and good. There's just a certain way of being that has always felt very natural to being here. It's almost like a place that, it's not like it was made for me, of course, but I feel like I was made for it in a way. I don't know that I'll be here forever, but I do. I have always felt like this was a very good fit. And as I think more about the work and how LA has impacted it, I think that we get a very raw understanding of the character types and archetypes that make what America is today. Again, thinking about LA as what I see as being the most American city. Well, if we're making American art about the contemporary human condition, this is full of archetypes. You can just look around. You have those, dark sunglasses and the blacked out 6 Series, driving really, really fast with like vape smoke coming out of the window kind of types. You have the elegant Beverly Hills moms, they're like 60 but look but look 42. They have like they're draped in beige silks, like and low heels, float around the museum and for lunch. You have like and then you have your models and movie stars and then you have like your crazy kind of like Harley Quinn Gotham City types. It's fascinating, and I think that some people could argue that this happens in New York too. But I've also thought of LA often being defined as in opposition to New York, not Chicago, Miami, or any of the other major cities that we have, because those two are seemingly cultural icons that also exist as cultural. I think people think about them as opposites. I just think them as very different, but not necessarily complete polar positions. So the work starts to draw from all of that. It's filled with, it's not just like, I mean, imagery, phantasmagoria is really more of the word that gets to it for me. It's all of the things at once. And LA feels that way. It's overwhelming, it's colorful. And I think that's the major difference for me. New York art and LA art, the way that art is shown in New York versus in LA, and the art that comes out of New York and LA. We have a bit of an adherence to tradition, to modernism, to a certain set of colors and themes, and a way that life is talked about and looked at. And in New York, and we have quite the opposite in LA: avant-garde, experimental, maximalist over minimalist, colorful, and thinking about color as meaning versus kind of an aesthetic that is established that you can kind of work within and slightly push parameters to get something new, like oh, we've gone from things are very smoothly rendered. There are a few brushstrokes we can see now, and suddenly it's called affective if it's New York, versus like here it's like oh, there's it's clay and it's using glaze, and then that's a material as meaning, and painting looks different. Painting is it can be more playful. I feel like here we're more playful, I think, than people may be in New York. And while I've always said another difference is New York is hard and LA has a certain harshness to it rather than being hard. It's overwhelming, but there's something to, I think, the aesthetics of both places that also reflect those feelings. LA is, like I said, like that movie title that just came out, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And New York is like this, now this, now this. And if you don't fit into these things, well, it's not you, and it's not you, and it's not you. And LA, it's like, sure, everything everywhere all at once. You might get a little bit, and you can try to get as much as you want as all at once. But you might get a little bit, and you might get nothing. But there is somewhere for everybody, which is something I think is interesting and unique to this space. But even if you look at our museums, like LACMA has red poles. We don't see, and the Met has stone pillars. Like, so that's that. We have Barbara Kruger. They have Tony Smith.
I feel like you guys need to do an episode where you just compare New York and LA, because you and Angelique, between her living there in the past and you both living in LA now, you could really talk shit in a funny way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's so true. It's I've been West Coast forever too. So, I mean, I went to school in Philly, but that's it. So
Well, let's talk about glamour. You mentioned that like, there's the classic Hollywood glamour, but LA, what I think is funny or dangerous about LA's glamour is it's seductive, but also in the way that a snake is. Yes. Like, let's get you close, let's get you tied in, and then if you're not paying attention, we're going to kill you.
Yes, I would think it's more like a spider. It's like you're pulled in, it made its web on a flower, and then you're stuck. And then you're paralyzed, and then you're poisoned, but the poison feels kind of good. It's like a little like, trippy. It's wavy. It's like it's colorful again. It's like the poison in like those early Hobbit movies where like he gets like a little like, ooh, like that's LA's poison because it feels good and looks good. New York, you're like, oh my God, when can I leave and go to Connecticut or something? Like, but like here it's like, oh, like when can I have enough to not have to do the things that I don't want to do but still keep doing all of this? And that's I think that's a difference here. Like, you can, to live and die in LA is more than a song, it's a concept.
Well, let's talk about how you specifically got attracted to glamour, because this shows up in the work. Like, we can talk about the ceramic history of it, but gold luster relating to like jewelry bling, this like shininess. Also, there's often hands with fingernails painted. There's this idea of like makeup or something that's applied to make you glamorous. So, can you talk about those symbols in the work?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always been drawn to gold. As soon as I realized you could put gold on clay and that looked like actual gold, I was, woo, taken. And that was in high school. My teacher was like, you know what, this would look really great on this gold. And I was like, you can do that? And she said, yes. Um, and that was that. I didn't use a lot of it because it was expensive, but I was lucky. My high school just gave it to us. So they were just like, here's some gold luster. And I was like, how much can I have?
Wow.
As much as you want. Tuition was a lot. So I would definitely put that to use. But in college, then it started getting expensive and all of that. And I focused a lot on technical development, things like that. But then as I started to use it more and think about the meaning of gold, it started with ideas of aesthetics, how it brought light to the work. I liked that. It makes it it activated it for me. It kind of brought it to life in a way. But there was also I started to think about ideas of what does it mean to have gold on something? Well, probably immediately value. This is the thing that's important in this. So I would use it as focal points, or to highlight a focal point. And then I thought about ideas of just actually representing the symbols and imagery around me. There's so much gold in LA, and I talk about like things being shiny. It's not just the cars, it's not just the sun itself, or like everybody's perfect skin that they paid for. It's me too, including the serums right here. But like, it's not the Zoom whitening that we get for free at UCLA. Can you believe that we get free Zoom whitening just because like
What?
that's so LA? I know. So $700 tooth whitening is part of our benefits. Like,
Are you
like
serious?
yeah, and that look at this, so it's like so when we think about that, that seems cultural to me. But it was all of those pieces of the experience of being here. And I then started to think also about, well, I can make clay. It's not that I can make, well, yes, but clay can look like anything. So there's an element of, well, not so much hiding the material, but creating some ambiguity with what people are looking at. Am I looking at, is this ceramics? Well, I have a certain idea around ceramics and all of these things, but if I don't know exactly what it is, then I don't know how to contextualize. And oh my God, I have to look at it as an object. I have to think of it as art. How terrible. Oh my God, I have to think, so what would that look like? Oh my God, well, sorry to overwhelm you, honey. But like, so that's the there were those elements of it too. And so I wanted to start to just bring that into the work. But I then started to think also about the history of gold and ceramics. And there's this fin de siècle aesthetic that came out of the end of the Renaissance. And this was a period when everybody was thinking about these social shifts that were happening between the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution as being the end of their life as they knew it, because society was changing, values were changing, the way that people saw each other and presented themselves to each other was changing. Fin de siècle extends to the present because our world is actually ending, whereas their social world was shifting, and thus that was an end to certain sets of power structures that were working then. What I like to think about now is we've seen the same ideas of aesthetics representing power, and if you look at histories of cultures, or I would even say more specifically regimes that have used gold and classical, or I would even say classicist aesthetics in their work, it usually tends toward like the most hegemonic forms of, like the most hegemonic governments and systems of power and domination that we've seen in the world, all to make it all look cute, even though it's not. It's about these ideas of making something look nice because it's not nice. If you can make violence and evil look like if you can make violence and evil beautiful, then suddenly it's palatable and thus moral and thus acceptable and something somebody can even subscribe to. Look at fascism. If you look at the Brandenburg Gate made by the Weimar Republic, well, That is a perfect example of it. And we all know what that who made that. So that's that. At the same time, if we look at just 4 years back at the White House, we see the same things. Exactly the same aesthetics, all gold everything, just like Versailles. And if you look at Napoleon, who had his own set of hegemonic forms of domination, and I'm sure he did some things that we haven't known about other than him being small. There, we see the same aesthetics. And so I think about those as gold now as ways of thinking about Western power and how it's moved through the world and how people have used gold and beauty and aesthetics to influence ideas of morality, propriety, and really goodness in the world, even though it's usually just used to dress up violence and fetishism and forms of domination and taking.
You mentioned fetishism, and I feel like a lot of times the object you're making, or you're kind of pulling from different objects, whether it's gold or clothing or parts of the body that are fetishized. So can you talk about that? Like making an object that is, I don't want to say it's a fetish because it didn't work like that, but I feel like you're referencing that.
I think that people don't fully understand the word fetish. And I think people usually think of it as being some kind of very specific, potentially strange sexual thing that you get into. Like, I don't know, like you need to have like 7 steaks on you in order to like you know like or like you need whatever, right? There has to be
Yeah.
a duck watching you or some weird shit like that. I don't know. But like a fetish is really just having from the more our historical perspective, it's having a relationship with an inanimate object. And there's object fetishism was something that also emerged in the Industrial Revolution, where objects were commodified instead of being individually made for people, just like clothing and even just like apartments. Everything was individual houses, and then you see like long vistas of the same architecture, all originating in 19th century Europe, mostly in Berlin and Paris. Now, that's a longer conversation around fetishism and object commodification as it relates to people, but the same thing is true. Like all those concepts still apply. So when we think about the ideas of looking at something, desiring it, and it being made to evoke senses of desire and also emotion in the viewer, that's beyond desire. I don't think of desire as an emotion. I think of it as kind of like a state, or like a kind of a physical feeling that something gives you versus an actual like somatic thing. It's like you're looking at something and you're drawn to it and you want to possess it. And then maybe the feeling that you get from it is an emotion, and maybe that's why you want to possess it. But I think those same things apply to people, especially being Asian American. I think of fetishism immediately. I haven't really gone into that territory with my work, but like the way that like the gays are with Asians, like they see like they're like, oh, you're Japanese, then they have so much to say and it's a little gross, but like uh those kind of things apply. And I think about those things in the work too. There is a real idea of attraction and repulsion, and both being the object of desire, but also having it be this thing that like, well, why do you want it? And you probably shouldn't, but here you are still like lusting after this thing. And also at the same time, or at the end of the day, it's just an object, but why are you so compelled to possess it? Or to talk about it, or to look at it, or to like have, it's all of these ideas that come into play. It's not so much just I don't think possession is the only form of consumption we're talking about when we look at it.
Yeah, and I wanted to back up and talk about 2 different styles of work. There's this piece, Your Last Meal. Do you know that? Or actually, I guess there's more than one, but this is the third.
I think there are 5.
5. Okay. So there's the third is this beautifully sculpted bowl of fruit, and is it a whip? What's the
It's a bowl. It's a bowl of figs with flowers, and 2 of the figs have eyes on them facing forward, and it's a snake that makes the shape of a mouth. So it's actually like like you're looking at a smiling, or is it grimacing face? It's kind of this like demonic, like teeth showing. Like it looks like it's thrilled, but maybe it's also like a bit in pain. It's about the idea of the heights of capitalism and power that people reach and how crazy it makes you, and the things that people will do to maintain that, but also to get there. And of course, the figs and the snake represent Cleopatra, the famous Egyptian queen who killed herself with the asp when she knew that she was going to lose all her power after Alexander the Great took the city. So it's about those ideas of capitalism that we still experience, because a lot of the Western canon from the ancient world in the Mediterranean is still what's defined our culture today. If you look at the Senate, well, there we are, and here we are.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that object. Is three-dimensionally is an amazing object. Like as a sculpture in space, it is a tour de force. But then you also have a direct representation. So that is a fig, like you see it, that is a fig. Then let's contrast that with other work, more recent work, that is things that either are frames, pools, reflective mirrors, things that are flat, and you're depicting symbols that are not actual symbols. So let's think about, there's this piece in 2020, Spiraling, which is like these figures or like small faces that are spiraling around this pool. But they're totally different ways of working. One is a sculpture, one is very skill-based. The other seems to be more about representation. So it is in like symbolic representation. Can you talk about like switching between those, or how it works to switch between those?
Absolutely. I think about I think about rendering as meaning. So the way that you make something as important as the thing itself that you're depicting. And so I think that sometimes things can be painted, some things can be sculpted to get to different sets of meaning. And so for me, the physical space is dominated by sculpture, and the idea of like reality comes into play. But the other half of that, or the other side of that, is the painted image is something that's imagined or fantastical. It is more of an idea. But at the same time, if you look at those paintings, they're on a physical format that's a mirror, or it's the shape of a mirror. It references a mirror. And so we still get into this play between physical and fantastical, or imagined and experienced, or imagined and real. And so it's about playing with the two, and getting into the space between the two, and both that also includes both of them. So I like it to be something that uses the opportunities of ceramics for expression, meaning, and just for its material qualities, but also, it uses the opportunities that painting presents, while also taking a bit from painting and saying, like, the canvas really isn't it. It's like or maybe for me, I would say the canvas isn't quite enough.
Well, it's funny, when I was looking at the work that does reference the mirrors, in my head, I'm thinking, is this work simpler? But it's not actually simpler. It's flat. It's on a plane, often with three-dimensional parts, but it is emotionally rich. It is symbolically rich. And it's a pretty big departure to go from sculpture, to that surface. But I like that you said that rendering is meaning. So depending on which one you choose, you're going for a different meaning. A lot of the recent work, it seems like, has been going towards the mirrors. Is that just like an illusion of looking at the website, or is that the actual way it is? Are you going more that direction?
Lately, but I want to move back to sculpture. But yes, I was really, and I still am really, into ideas of thinking about the self. Before, it was more self-obsession, and it's, that's still something that comes into the work, thinking about millennial culture and the ideas that are core to who we are. It's if you think about Gen Z versus millennials versus Gen X versus boomers, it's all very different. But I think that for us, more than anything, it's about the self, and it's about competition, it's about perfection, and it's about who's the best, and also morally who's the worst, because it's like, who should you be most afraid of? And that's hot to us. And so it is. We love it. And so there's that element of looking at the self in that way as well. The mirrors are both reflection and being fixated on the self, but they're also literal self-reflection.
Why do you think that millennial attraction to what is evil is dangerous? Like tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
I would say we are drawn to the danger because there's a protective element. It's not so much being drawn to danger, sorry, it's about being the danger. If you look at the culture that's formed us in the media, I mean, being a bad bitch was not something that people ever said in like the 90s. No, I don't think so. I think and it really became popular with Nicki Minaj. And I'm sure some hip hop historian or ethnomusicologist can correct me if they feel that need. But there's that's very millennial, and it's even like it's like language that people are like, oh yes, and it's like accepted. It wouldn't even be before, like, oh my god, you just said that, I'm not bad, I can't believe you used that word, all these things in the 90s or whatever. But now it's like, no, like, it's not like she a bad bitch, like like or even like, or the short, and like that's a baddie, like. And so it's not, there's an aesthetic of like, it's not, and I don't mean like purely visual aesthetic, it's like, it's the whole, I hate the word vibe, but it is like, it's a whole vibe that's like, which also is so millennial and overused because of us, because we're empowered now, because like we're in our 30s, and we have the next 15 years before the next generation catches up. But it really is. It's the high contrast black and gold. It's the highest heels, the sharpest stiletto, the most expensive one, whatever. Like the lowest body fat, the shiniest hair. It's, and I maybe this is me. I think part of it is me. Yes. I think we all have our own worldviews, and our unique little pixels of the larger picture that we're looking at as of the moment. But, and maybe it's LA, maybe it's the West Coast, but it's still, and maybe it's the art world, but those things still always feel very true to me. And yes, it is one perspective on what it means to be a millennial, but I think that's a big part of it. And I think it does come from an element of like, don't play with me, because like everybody has tried it for so long. And I think that, I don't know, there's stuff that we grew up with, I think, and it's stuff that we've like seen that we're like, oh, I'm not doing that, I'm not going to be the one. And there's also an element of blackness in it too, which I think when I talk about like, oh, well, maybe it's me, it's like there are phrases I think that also attach to it, like, I am not the one, and like, what you won't do is, and things like that that are tied to all of this. And I think there really is a visual aesthetic that follows those things. It's like, who's not the one, and I'll show you that it's me.
Well, also competition in the culture is such an embedded part of music. It's an embedded part of social media. It's also an embedded part of less resources. Like theoretically, statistically, you have less ability to have less resources by age than say, our parents. Like things actually are worse for the younger generation than they were economically. So competition is real. You know what I mean? Like there's less access to money, so we're going to fight to get that. And I wonder if that will ever turn around, or as the gap between the rich and the poor gets, bigger and bigger and bigger, is it always going to be like, because historically this happens, like people of less means steal the aesthetics of people with more means to act in a way that takes that power, which I think makes great art.
Sure. I mean, I think like stealing is like, yeah, we could say that. I think also like, I think I call it more like an aspirational fantasy, but yes. Like, but sure, it is what it is. I think that it could be considered stealing. It's like, oh, you're not like necessarily of that, but you like, well, you like that, okay, or that's what you want to be, okay, or that's like or that's who you're supposed to be, okay.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Amoco Brent. For the past 100 years, Amoco Brent has been creating ceramic supplies for our community, ranging from underglazes to electric kilns, and they have no plans of slowing down. With over 3,000 products, Amoco Brent's top priority is making sure that all of their customer needs are met. From the professional to the student and everyone in between, their high-quality materials enable you to make your best work. To learn more, check them out at amoco.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Amoco Brent. You can also show them how you use Amoco by sharing your work online with the hashtag HowIAmoco. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfeld Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of thousands of objects made by over 800 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com. What are you seeing with your students? Because we should bring your teaching into this. Can you describe where you teach, and then also sort of the dynamics of what you're seeing of students that are 10 years or more younger? What are they dealing with along these lines?
Yeah, I teach high school at the Geffen Academy at UCLA. It's UCLA's high school, which most people don't know exists, but it opened in 2017, the year before I graduated. And then I got this right after I finished my MFA and then came straight here from UCLA to UCLA. So Gen Z is very soft, I would say. It's the first thing that I would say about them. However, as I say that, and my students have gotten me interested in this, like one of the first TikToks I saw, which is so extremely Gen Z. They think that we're old for using Instagram, and I'm like, yes, like it's not Facebook. Come on, but like it's not MySpace, which you haven't even heard of. But like, okay, but there was like a TikTok where this guy was saying, "We're not soft, we're just not racist and homophobic like the rest of you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. First of all, like the rest of us. Secondly, like, I guess you're right. We are. Everybody is talking about feelings and why you shouldn't make somebody feel a way for whatever their identity markers are, because to Gen Z, it's their I don't really know if I believe in post-racial, or I don't see color, or obviously, like, I didn't notice that thing in this person. Obviously, everybody sees everything. You take all the information and you can choose how you react to it. But the way that Gen Z is kind of forming themselves and forming their peers culturally is really it's not just tolerance. I think we were tolerance and their acceptance. They're not interested in division by identity markers. They're really interested in division by how somebody makes you feel, or it's literally the content of people's characters. But at the same time, they do believe in cancel culture. They're like, oh, well, this person said something transphobic, so we just don't fuck with them anymore, and that's that. And I was like, okay, well, that's different from millennials who are like, they're not hot, so next. But like it's like because if you are, you can say whatever you want, we don't care, which is its own kind of set of problems. But I think Gen Z is hilarious. They're a bit strange. They're super sweet. They like if I think about the aesthetics of like what they are, it's like Lisa Frank, like all of those like dolphins and psychedelics, and like things floating in space that don't make sense, and like just the end of like laser cats for millennials kind of thing, basically. But they're the things that they think about are compassion and acceptance. And when I think about, like, I can give you some examples. One time I heard these two students arguing. They were seventh graders, and even growing up in Seattle, I went to public school briefly, and I was thinking of, like, I walked through the hallways and someone said, like, why why did you, or it was like a little bit of a hood school. It's like, why did you have to throw hands? Like, well, she looked at me wrong. Like, huh? Like, versus like here, they're arguing over, it's a very different, I would say, and I don't mean special, it's like rarefied or better than anywhere else, but it's like a really special set of students, and I really do care about them, and like thrilled to see the way they engage with each other. So they are a bit, they're fighting over, I think they were fighting over like IQ tests or something like that, because they're nerds, but they're really lovely. And they were like arguing about something, and then this girl was like, you know what, you're not being very compassionate right now. I was like, wow. 13-year-olds, instead of like, well, she looked at me wrong. Like, it was really different. And there are things like that. I think that when the way that they talk about gender identity, sexuality, race is really different. I think that they're aware of history. They're troubled by the uprisings that were happening, not because of the fact that they were happening. Like some of the like previous generations who were like I heard gunshots and I'm upset about that, and they should just stay in their neighborhoods. No, whatever. Gen Z was like, well, yeah, like it shouldn't be like this, and like I'm so upset about the fact that it is like this, and it's wrong, and I understand why people are fighting and why they're mad, and I wish the world wasn't like this. I'm not going to go outside because I'm 12, but like, yeah, and there are other times I've heard really lovely passive examples of acceptance and shifts in the world where somebody was talking about trans identity just by saying, "Oh yeah, well he used to be a she used to be a boy." Next. Like it was like, "Oh yeah, well she used to be a boy." Anyway, like or that's oh yeah, that's her girlfriend and she used to be a boy. Like next. And like, "Oh okay, cool." Moving right along. It's not so much of like I feel like, 10 years ago the thinking about that corporate internship that I mentioned at the beginning of this, there was sort of like this somebody would say something like that after a long pause, thinking of all the euphemisms they can make, and then there would be like a like kind of moment in the group versus like oh yes, now we're activating tolerance. Like, oh ew, tolerance, bye. Like yeah.
I've talked to my wife about this. Like, are we just going to have older racist people pass away for this to change? Like,
Yes.
is that the solution? So I wonder, it's hopeful to hear that, like you said, you've moved from, I can't remember what you said, but like tolerance to acceptance, I think. So I love this idea that once you accept anyone that doesn't look like you, because that's also what it comes down to is like in the 50s, you needed to look like the white military leader. Like that was a cultural imperative. And then the 60s, they were like, hell no, get out of there. Mm-hmm. But then it's still taking all these years for that to go away. So I hope that Gen Z has figured out that actually it doesn't, like if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. It doesn't matter what you look like.
Yes. And they won't have it. I mean, it's not that and it's not like that Gen Z is this pure set of people either. I mean, like those old racist people had kids and they had kids and they had kids. So it's not, again, I am in a specific, I am referencing a specific sample set, if you will. But I think that more than anything, I'm more hopeful with this generation than I am with my own, because I was like, I think that a lot of this competition also, or like some of the aesthetics of violence for protection, come from knowing that like, oh, this is how you guys are. And thus this is how we are. And this is what I'm dealing with. And this is why we fight the way we do. And why it's like, oh, like, well, you're hanging off the cliff and I'm not going to help you. Like versus Gen Z is like, how'd you get there? Oh my God. Huh? Like, like you want a rope and a ladder and everything else. And I'll call a friend. And millennials like, that looks rough. Well, moving right along.
Well, let's switch gears and talk about Clay and Color, because one of the things that I like about your guys' podcast is that the first season really did focus on young artists. So can you talk about the development of the show and then why that specific age and aesthetic interests you and Angelique as well?
Yeah. So we wanted to make Clay and Color because there wasn't enough visibility to artists of color working in clay. And I think that's a very simple and straightforward way of putting it that I think everybody is aware of. If we look at the canon, though we talked about him and he is wonderful, it's Adrian Sachs, it's Toni Marsh, it's Ken Price, it's Ron Nagel, it's John Mason, it's Peter Volkos, and then sprinkled in we have Kathy Butterly and a few others that unfortunately don't come to mind as immediately or as easily, which I think is a reflection of exactly why we're doing this. And so it's that. At the same time, it is about highlighting a younger generation because we want to bring those names into people's minds, but also to be able to give a broader visibility to what clay can do, who does clay, what clay can look like, and how it can access and reflect identity, experience, and meaning in the contemporary. Because while those people in the past who are still alive, yes, some of them are very important and made it so that we have they did all the foundational work for us to be able to jump into the contemporary canon. They have one perspective from a long time ago. And while they're still commenting on the contemporary, they're doing it from the dispositional circumstances and perspective of somebody who was formed in the 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even 30s. So so we wanted to give that broader visibility to demographics that just haven't been seen enough. And I think that if you think about art as at its core a visual endeavor, even though this is, yes, it's a podcast, you're listening to it, we want people to be able to know the things to look for, to be able to look at work that is about them and is about, if it's not necessarily their specific identity, generally their identity. They're still millennials. They're still from certain places. We have a broad range of identities represented, and so just like the infinite possibilities that's offered by clay, we wanted to be able to show at least, if not the infinite, as many voices as possible.
The range that you guys had on the first season, like straight off the bat, Emily Young Beck, she was the first episode, that talk about the politics of porcelain. I don't know if you remember that talk, but I feel like that should be expanded and put in a textbook because it is looking at history in a different way. But like you start off like that, but then there's also some emotionally potent moments, like that interview with Alake Schilling. Like there was this,
Beautiful.
I mean, people just got to listen to it because there's no way we can really describe like what it was like to hear her basically give a treatise on how you should be yourself. It was phenomenal.
It was how to be an artist, which was saying be yourself to be an artist, which is like, oh my God. I think that there are moments in that, yeah, when you say emotionally beautiful, that was, we're not going to say that any of the podcasts, episodes were better or worse or more valuable or whatever, but like that one really struck me as well. It's the only podcast I've listened to actually of ours, because I don't like hearing my voice, but I wanted to hear hers again, and not I just wanted to hear like what she was saying again. It was like so meaningful, and I was like, wow. As I listened to this actually like just a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this is so good. It's what the things that I wanted to, that I didn't know that I needed to hear when I was younger, that I wish I had heard.
If there was a heart emoji that is a podcast, it's like that. Like that show is like all the good feelings in one show. So I hope people will check it out. But you guys have been recording the second season. So can you talk a little bit about who's going to be on it, and what you guys are going for this year?
We have a lot of different artists on our second season of Clay and Color. We're really excited about all of them. Our first episode is Bonnie Ramirez, who had a fabulous show at Thierry Goldberg in New York. And we talked about painting, we talked about ceramics, we talked about ideas of like where one comes from and how that starts to take form in the work. And I've noticed that a lot of the work that we're talking about has been about ideas of origin and transitioning into different spaces. I think that even as ceramic artists, we don't really come into the art world, and that has its own kind of transitional idea as well. There's like innocence to experience, the classic literary trajectory, but I think here we're kind of seeing similar things as well, where it's about like, we have young artists who found their way into clay, and it was something that became the most meaningful way or the best way to express their lived experience, like any artist does. But it's
But one of the things that's different is that you guys are talking to folks like Beth Lowe, like an older generation, which I think I'm excited to hear, just because I love her work as well as some of the other folks you guys have picked.
Yeah, I think Beth Lowe is a great example of one of the older generation artists that we've spoken to. We also interviewed Melvino Goretti, who has lived in LA for his entire life and has been making ceramics since the 60s. So it's great to have some of that generational context for the work that's being made today that's in the same city as a lot of our working artists. It seems to be LA, New York, Philly. We're, of course, open to everywhere. But when we think about those cities that can be defining with relation to American culture and iconography and art, it is exciting to be able to see a trajectory from what the past generation that's still working was interested in contrast with, or perhaps even as a complement to, what's being made today with younger artists.
One of the questions that you often ask some of the younger ones is, do your parents understand what you do? And almost universally, they all say no.
Nobody understands what we do. Our significant others don't understand what we do. Our parents don't understand it until they see the checks. And then they're like, well, I don't really know what you do, but at least I don't have to worry. And I'm like, well, of course you don't, because I make more than you. So
At what point, though, did your parents understand? Like, was it grad school? Like, what was the thing in which they're like, okay, he knows what he's doing?
When I started saying things like, I make more money than you. And they were like, and she was like, oh, I'm like, well, I don't know why you, and I'm like, yeah, well, you don't have to worry about any of this because it's like, it's money you wouldn't understand. They're like, but, and maybe that's not nice, but whatever, it is what it is. So like, there was always the idea of, I just want you to be happy, which is tied to, I want you to be the version of, what I understand happiness to look like, which is security and comfort and being boring, like the last generation and last generation. And so I was like, well, that's not going to happen, and I'm going to go find my own happiness. But no, they don't really. I don't think they understand what we do, but I think they do recognize when a work of art is strong. There are things they connect to. That sometimes they look at things and they're like, wow, that's really nice. I'm like, thanks. Like I liked it too. And what it does show me is that, and I guess this wasn't really the question, but it makes me think of this, is the idea that beauty is universal and universally compelling. So there are good works of art that we like in the art world. There are good works of art that we like specifically in different disciplines. Painters like things that are like, oh, that's a really great painting. And somebody else might be like, that Franz Klein is like somebody took the 2-inch wide brush from Home Depot and the 4-inch wide brush from Home Depot and then and drew some lines, and we're like, no, but actually it's reflective of like the larger modernist aesthetic that he contributed. Whatever. But like, that's them. They wouldn't get it. There are things that we like in ceramics, like, oh my God, this like perfectly glazed celadon piece. So, like, it's Long Twin. Like, what's that? Like, and this celadon, you don't get it. It's like this green color is very rare. Like, okay, cool. Like they don't get it. But then they see some things and they're just like, that's gorgeous. Oh my God. And like, yes, it is. So I think the things that they understand are the things that, they can see that connect with what their values are. And then also, I think there are some things that are just part of natural human programming. Beauty is always, I think, people overlook it. People talk about it as being surface or a seductive tool for hiding whatever you want to, whatever. But one professor in grad school said, I don't like ceramics because it's seductive and I want it. So I feel like I just avoid it because I feel like it's seducing me. And I'm like, or maybe you just like it. What the fuck? Like,
yeah.
like what? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, do you look at the things on a menu and are like, that looks really good, I'm gonna not have it? Like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like,
there might have been some other issues going on there.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think that's like it's the same kind of pathos that seems to permeate the art world. Oh, it's lovely. Let's ignore it. It's wrong. So no, but I do think beauty is a universal that people will always understand, whether they like it or not.
To wrap up, can you leave your Instagram or the gallery website so people could see the work?
Oh, yes. My Instagram is 100 Alex Anderson, and that's spelled with a 100, like 100, like the emoji. And my gallery that I just started working with is Sergeant's Daughters in New York, and I think it's just sergeantsdaughters.com, like John Singer Sargent. It's what their gallery ethos is, traditional materials with a cutting edge approach. So ceramics, and here we go.
And then Clay and Color is coming out soon, so plug that as well.
Oh yes. Listen to Clay and Color. It's going to be an exciting new season. We have a broad range of artists, a lot of different perspectives for you to get into, and we're as excited as we hope you are to hear the new season. Not that I'm going to listen to it because I don't like hearing myself, but we hope you like it, and we're excited to share this next iteration.
Well, thanks for taking the time to do this, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to thank Alex for coming on the show. It was nice to chat with him, and I want to wish he and Angelique well wishes and good luck for the second season of Clay and Color. That show, as well as my own, are a part of the Brickyard Network, which is an arm of the Archie Bray Foundation. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary, which I couldn't be more excited about. If you're interested in sponsoring an episode of this show or any of the shows on the network, we'd love to have your support. I did want to thank today's sponsors, the Michiana Pottery Tour, Snow Farm, the New England Craft Program, and Amico Brent for their generous support of our programming. If you or your organization is interested in getting involved, you can get in touch with me through the network website. That's brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.
We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities whose lands we reside on in the United States, and recognize that we are uninvited guests on the occupied, unceded, and ancestral lands of over 500 nations indigenous to North America. By acknowledging and reflecting upon the contemporary lived experiences and histories of the Indigenous peoples here and globally, we may begin to take essential steps towards creating a more equitable world. Learn more through the hashtag Honor Native Land initiative of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, and consider contributing to Indigenous-led organizations doing important work to further health and wellness, sovereignty, and self-determination of the first people of the lands you reside. This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.